Started now. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Corey Tull, and I'm the organizing director for the Canadian Freshwater Alliance. And I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the unceded Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We are also joined by the entire Freshwater Alliance team, which is pretty exciting because there's not many times that we have all of us on a webinar at once. So it's going to be an exciting afternoon, that's for sure, and you'll get a chance to be introduced to each of our team members as we move through the webinar. For those of you who perhaps this is your first webinar hosted by the Alliance, I want to tell you a little bit about us. The Canadian Freshwater Alliance builds, connects, and supports freshwater initiatives across Canada. We work with NGOs, community groups, governments, and businesses to strengthen citizen voices and participation in protecting our lakes and rivers. And we are a project on the Tides Canada shared platform. So a few housekeeping things just as we get started here. Please mute yourself. We definitely can hear background noise throughout the webinar, and because we will be recording this session, it's nice to keep the background noise to a minimum. Those of you who have logged on through your computers or your tablets or your iPads or phones, we automatically mute you. But if you've called in, we'll require you to mute your phone yourself. So if you can all make sure that you are muted right now, that's fabulous. We do have a chat box function, which will allow you to ask the presenters questions. So if you are logged on through your computer, you'll notice in the toolbox that pops up on your computer, the chat function, and in there, we're introducing yourself right now. Thank you for doing that. You can ask your questions there. And so as we move through the presentation, we'll have a discussion period at the end where we can answer any of your questions that do come up. So please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. Now, for those of you who are phoning in, and if you don't have access to the chat box, we still want you to be able to ask us your questions. And so my colleague Megan will be fielding questions via email. So if for some reason you can't submit your question through the chat box on your computer, or if you are phoning in, please feel free to email Megan. And her email address is megan@freshwateralliance.ca. So that's megan@freshwateralliance.ca. So feel free to email those questions to Megan, and we'll make sure to do our best during the discussion period so that everybody has an opportunity to get the information and the answers that they're looking for. So, as we get started here, it's an exciting time across our country, and particularly a timely one with this webinar. Municipal elections are coming this fall across Canada. We've got municipal elections in BC, Manitoba, the Northwest Territories, Ontario, PEI, and in the Yukon, all happening this fall. So an election at any level really is a great organizing opportunity to advance the bigger conversation on the issues that either your organization is working on or issues that you personally are passionate about within your communities that you've been pushing for. And so these organizing opportunities are a great time and place to inject these conversations into a bigger community conversation about what needs to come next and what potential leadership you're looking for within your community at the local level. So with so many across the country at once, it is a very unique opportunity to not only grow your conversations in your local communities, but for us to really grow a freshwater conversation across the country. And so over the next hour, we're going to go through the following elements of what it looks like to make freshwater a municipal issue. And so we're going to look at, let's see here we go. We're going to look at the role of municipalities in protecting water and the gaps that are currently out there. We're going to look at opportunities, and so how can engaging municipal candidates advance key freshwater priorities? And this is where you're going to hear from representatives from each sort of section of our organization, whether we're looking at opportunities in British Columbia or Ontario or the Great Lakes, looking at green infrastructure and federal opportunities to really advance this bigger conversation. So we'll dive into a little bit more detailed opportunities in that second section. And then following that, we're going to speak a little bit to what are some of the tools that you can use to engage your candidates, as well as your members and your constituents within your communities to build this freshwater conversation. And then we will have a discussion period, as I mentioned. So submit your questions into the chat box, email Megan with your questions, and then we can dive into that discussion period a little bit deeper. So let's jump right in to our first section around the how municipalities can protect freshwater. And so I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Christine Mettler.
Hello, everybody. It's Christine here from Kelowna, BC, which is unceded Syilx territory. So thanks to everyone who's able to join us today. So my little piece here is just starting off with, is everyone able to see the screen? It's been kind of flashing a little bit for me, so I want to make sure. It seems to be stable now, but if there's any issues, just type it in the chat box and let us know, and we'll troubleshoot that. I think in Canada, in particular, we have a lot of different levels of government. We have, 5 different levels of government. So that's Indigenous governments, federal government, provincial, regional, municipal governments, and then we also have kind of in different provinces, either other governmental agencies or quasi-governmental agencies, like in BC, there's irrigation districts, in Ontario, conservation authorities. So there's a lot of different levels of government and players that collaborate with government, and sometimes it can be pretty hard to understand, who is responsible for what. So we prepared this primer, and we'll be sharing out these resources after the webinar today that breaks down pretty simply what municipalities can do. It's a very high level document, and and if you want to get into some more details, we can point you to some other documents as well. But essentially, municipalities get their power from provincial legislation. So every province has a different legislation that sets out what local governments can and can't do. In BC, for example, we have the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, which is much more enabling legislation. So it gives municipalities the ability to create regulations in different areas. In Ontario, it's the Municipal Act. So every province has an act like that. And so those pieces of legislation, they do differ slightly, but overall, there are some really key areas of things that municipalities can regulate and some kind of key areas of influence. So, in every province, the Municipal Act or it's whatever that act is, does give municipalities the ability to be able to regulate and make decisions around land use and development. And that's a really big one. And obviously land has a very large impact on water. They're very inextricably linked. So land use and development is a really big one. Another area of influence is local infrastructure. So, whether that's roads, having green infrastructure along roads is a really big area of influence, as long as it's not a provincial highway, but local roads. Drinking water and sewage services, most municipalities own the utility. And if they don't own the utility, they work very closely with the utility and have a lot of responsibility when it comes to making sure that, that drinking water is clean and healthy, and that citizens and constituents they'll get into a lot of trouble if there's something that is wrong with drinking water. So they have, if they don't own the utility themselves, they have a lot of responsibility in overseeing that utility. And then those acts also give, some of them have different stipulations, but there's a lot of other activities that are related that they can create rules. So one example is trees. In BC, for example, municipalities are allowed to regulate around trees. So they could say that new homeowners aren't allowed to cut down heritage trees. Some municipalities have regulations around that. So Corey, if I could just get you to go to the next slide there. So there's a bunch of different levers that municipalities have in order to be able to impact, to be able to exert their influence in those areas that I just discussed. So the first is bylaws. Bylaws are actual laws that have accountability, that they can be enforced, and that there can be, if they're violated, there are punishment mechanisms or compliance mechanisms. So bylaws, it could be anything from bylaws around green infrastructure requiring that when it rains, that at least 90% of the runoff that is generated from rain is infiltrated at the source. And that in that way, it keeps it out of local water bodies, lakes and rivers and what have you. Another example is bylaws around trees, for that, what I just said, or that new developments need to have a certain amount of green infrastructure in them. So there's a lot of different kind of bylaws that municipalities can create. If you're interested, there's actually a really great document that was created called the Green Bylaws Toolkit. It's over 300 pages, and it has a lot of different examples of how municipalities in British Columbia have created bylaws in order to protect the natural environment and watersheds. So there's a lot of different tools that municipalities can use. Another one is funding. So, like I said, many municipalities oversee the provision of water and wastewater services. But, for example, leaky drinking water pipes in cities across the country have been found to waste billions of liters of water each year, and outdated sewage systems have also resulted in trillions of liters of untreated sewage being released into lakes and rivers around the country. So funding for infrastructure upgrades are really crucial to advancing watershed health. Municipalities can fund projects with existing revenue. There's a lot of municipalities in Canada and across North America, around the world, that are looking at new innovative funding mechanisms. So, for example, stormwater drainage fees, to create a new funding base in order to fund stormwater upgrades or upgrades to the drinking and wastewater service systems. And also another thing to notice is that the federal government recently announced $2 billion of funding for local governments to mitigate climate-related events. So there's a huge source of funding there that's available from the federal government. Programs is another area. So they can develop programs that incentivize residents to take actions. They can develop programs that are outreach and education programs. They can implement conservation-oriented rate structures for drinking water. A lot of different kind of programs. They can. The city of Kingston, for example, recently implemented a program where they made sewage stormwater overflows real-time data available on their website, publicly accessible. So that was a pretty novel thing. And so now anyone can go online and see if there's been sewer overflows to public water bodies and see when that's happening. So that's a pretty big thing. Another one is just showing leadership. So, municipalities can show symbolic and substantive leadership for freshwater health. They can do that in a lot of different ways. So maybe that's by adopting a resolution. I know a lot of municipalities have recently adopted a resolution under the Blue Dot program with David Suzuki that made, the right to healthy water a right in their municipalities, and adopted that resolution. They can develop memorandums of understandings with local Indigenous communities that outlines an intention to work together to advance freshwater health. They can develop freshwater strategies. So they can do a lot of different things that really shows their leadership in both substantive and symbolic ways to say, like, we're taking this seriously. And then, Corey, if you can go to the next slide. So, and a fifth tool that is pretty important is advocacy. So I don't know if many of you have heard this. I have heard this in my own city, where mayor and council says, this issue is out of our jurisdiction, our hands are tied, it's the province's jurisdiction or it's the federal jurisdiction, and we can't do anything. But I personally think that's a bit of it's a bit of a cop-out, because municipalities can do things and they can take an advocacy role. Municipalities ask higher levels of government for things all the time, whether that's funding, for example, for housing and infrastructure. And so it's really a question of priorities. And there's a lot of different ways that municipalities can advocate to higher levels of government. So there's some really interesting examples of, multi-city collaborations. There is an initiative that's not related to freshwater, but it's called Cities Innovating to Reduce Poverty, where there's hundreds of municipalities across the country that are working together in this both substantive and symbolic way to say, they're really working hard to reduce and ultimately end poverty, and advocating to their respective provinces for support. Another way to advocate is through local government associations. So, for example, in British Columbia, the Union of BC Municipalities recently adopted a provision, and Freshwater Alliance worked really hard on this as well, saying that that we needed to have more collaborative local watershed governance. And then the province will be responding to that as well. So this is all municipalities in BC that recently signed on to this. So a role for freshwater advocates or organizations in this is helping municipalities to actually be able to articulate what the asks are to higher levels of government. And so after this webinar, we'll send out an example of this, which is the Water Sustainability and the City Report, which is a report that was done with local government practitioners in British Columbia, looking at some barriers to being able to adequately protect water and watersheds at the local level, and what they would like to see from the province in order to be able to increase their own ability and capacity to protect watersheds. So that report contains some recommendations, and that's all taken from research and interviews with local governments. So I'll just tie up my part there, and we can come back to this if anyone has questions later.
Great, thank you so much, Christine. I'd like to pass this over to Lindsay Telfer, the project director with the Canadian Freshwater Alliance.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I am joining you today from Central Ontario, Orillia, and I am on the unceded Anishinaabe and Huron-Wendat territory here in Orillia, right on the shores of Lake Simcoe and Lake Couchiching, two of my favorite places to hang out in the summer when our beaches aren't closed. And unfortunately in Orillia, our beaches were posted more often this year than I've seen in the nearly decade that I've been living here. And so certainly freshwater issues locally are percolating to the top of my priorities as we enter into this election period. I just wanted to touch in, and Christina's touched on these two of the points that I'm going to dive into a little bit more detail on, which is around sewage and combined sewer overflow events entering our waterways. And then also the opportunities to advance green infrastructure within our communities at the municipal level. And so I think sewage and combined sewer overflows are two topics that are where our municipalities can have significant impact. And when it comes to sewage and sewer overflows and discharge events, which for the purposes of this webinar, I think the strategies for addressing them are very comparable. And so I'm keeping them as a bucket, despite the fact that I know they're two different issues. And sewage discharge is when there's a capacity issue at a treatment facility, or maybe even a lack of a treatment facility, where sewage gets discharged directly into our waterways. The flip is combined sewers, which is our infrastructure in many, particularly older communities across the country, where rainwater sewers enter into the same sewer systems as our household waste products. And when those sewer systems hit capacity, you get an overflow event, often associated, alongside sort of frequent storm events that we're seeing with increased intensity across the country. So these are sort of two challenges that a lot of communities across the country experience. And for those of you who are joining us at the rally in just over a week in Moncton, New Brunswick, we're going to be releasing some new data on combined sewer overflow events in communities across Canada, as well as a combined sewer overflow toolkit for communities, which will be available for folks if this is an issue or a challenge that is facing your community. We've been working with Swim Drink Fish Canada and Ottawa River Keeper on those resources. So stay tuned, some more is coming out very soon on this topic. But there are 3 steps that I think we can advocate for in the lead up to elections. And the first one, and as Christine already noted, is really a public right to know. We have a right to know when there's been sewage discharge or overflow events into our waterways. And so setting up notification systems where the public can be notified of such events, so we can incorporate that into our own decision making of whether or not it's safe to swim or recreate in near those water bodies. Step 2 is to then work within our communities to mitigate overflow and discharge events, hopefully eliminate overflow and discharge events. And I left the XYZ here on purpose. And the reason that I didn't spell that is because it really depends what's causing the overflow or discharge events on how you might go about to mitigate and or eliminate those specific activities. I think I saw there that Marlo's here from Winnipeg Foundation. They've got a very specific issue with a water treatment facility and discharging untreated waters into systems. That's a very different mitigation scenario than if you're looking at a smaller community with aging infrastructure and combined sewers, and how you might go about to mitigate and or eliminate those events. So depending on what is causing your overflow or discharge events, we can work with our cities and municipalities to really define an action plan so that we can reduce and hopefully eliminate those events from taking place. And then third is really around, I think, a specific opportunity, which is in our stormwater master plans. Almost, I think all communities are required to have stormwater master plans detailing out how your city is dealing with stormwater. And this is really, and they're renewed usually every 5 years. And so this is a real opportunity if your stormwater master plan is up for renewal within the period of council, you have a great opportunity to put it on the radar of potential councillors and make sure that it's an issue that they are knowledgeable on and aware of and are taking a stand on, so that we can actually get robust master plans. There's also climate adaptation plans that a lot of communities are completing, which can have a huge opportunity, again, to get water and freshwater issues onto the agenda of our councils. And also I see ourselves, if we want to segue to the next slide, I also see us within the NGO community as potential educators of some of our candidates and councillors. As we know, with a lot of elected officials, they're not necessarily experts, or can they be experts in all of the issues that they're addressing on council or in government. And so as advocates and as champions for freshwater health, I think we play a really important role in what I call political education, and helping our elected officials have the information so that they can make the best decisions for our communities. And on the flip side to sewage and entering our waterways, I think green infrastructure is a tremendous opportunity for us to put forward some solutions within our communities. And when I'm talking about green infrastructure, I'm not talking about another pilot project in a community. I think pilot projects are 100% important. We need them, but we have to start getting our communities beyond pilot projects. And ensuring that development decisions, from the new development going in around the corner to a new parking lot downtown, are being made with green infrastructure requirements on hand. And we need to start to see Canadian communities start to transform the way water is managed when it falls in our communities. And green infrastructure is such a tremendous opportunity to do that. And so I think it makes sense for green infrastructure to be a municipal election issue. How does development happen in our communities, and how does it happen in a way that we are proud and can celebrate and actually gives back to the health of our community? And there's a number of things that we can advocate for specifically within green infrastructure, from runoff reduction targets to stormwater user fees, which we're seeing in communities across the country. There's over 30 communities now that have some form of stormwater user fees. Other incentives for private property owners to include green infrastructure, and or a commitment to include green infrastructure in all new public infrastructure projects. At a bare minimum, our communities should be required to ensure that green infrastructure is embedded in infrastructure developments within the municipal boundaries. And obviously, these are all things that our municipalities have the power to be leaders on, but they won't be leaders if we're not bringing them up and making them and giving them the information that enables their leadership.
Great, thank you so much, Lindsay. That was wonderful. Next up, we have our Great Lakes organizer, Raj Gill, to speak to some of the Lake Erie and Great Lake opportunities. And just before Raj starts, just a reminder to folks, if you do have questions, feel free to put them into the chat box. And if you are calling in from your phone, you can email your questions to Megan, MEGAN, at freshwateralliance.ca. Take it away, Raj.
Hello, everyone. So I'm also phoning in from as was Lindsay, so unceded Anishinaabe and Huron-Wendat territory. And I'm just going to take a few minutes. I know we're already running behind schedule, so I'll try to whip through this. I'm going to speak just to a few of the issues in Lake Erie and the Great Lakes, and obviously there are many, many more. But I think all these issues also apply more broadly to many of our waterways, and so I think there's opportunities to collaborate more than just within the Great Lakes region. As many of you know, one of the main issues that gets quite a bit of profile is blue-green algae blooms in Lake Erie and across the country, really. And so this is an area that we've been working on quite a bit over the last few years. And so this is one area where a lot of our supporters are looking for content to sort of raise the profile at the municipal level. And so some of the ways we're doing that is trying to really use this as an opportunity to push municipal candidates to make some commitments on as to what they might do to deal with the issues. One of the key points for us that we're sort of playing on this year is the fact that economic forecasts for not addressing the Lake Erie algae blooms is in the range of 272 million annually. And so this is economic forecasts of if we don't address with the algae issue, what's the impact going to be? And the largest impact really is the forecasts say on property values and on the recreation and tourism sectors, which is huge in southwestern Ontario. And so looking at those are really, municipalities are going to take that hit pretty hard if that's the case. And so bringing that information to municipal candidates, I think, is really important, because often a lot of the regulation and policy decisions around the algae blooms is being made at the provincial and federal level. And so often, again, as Christine was saying earlier, there's sort of this idea that it's not it's not our responsibility. We can't do anything. And so this is sort of bringing it back home and saying, actually, you can. In terms of some of the key questions that we're asking people and organizations to ask to their candidates, and this can be through all candidates debates or surveys. There'll be different tools that I think we're talking about at the end of this webinar that you can use to ask these questions, but really looking at, will candidates address the algae problem, and if so, how? And the opportunity here, it can be tailored depending on the type of municipality you're in. So if you're in a more urban municipality, say London, if we're talking about Lake Erie, the Thames River is a major contributor of nutrients to Lake Erie. The municipal responsibility within a sort of urban environment can sort of focus on implementing green infrastructure projects, dealing with sewage overflows, and such things, like those kind of things. If it's a more rural municipality, so if you're thinking Chatham-Kent or some of the other municipalities that are a bit more rural focused, then the focus on solutions that might, one could propose to candidates might focus more on requiring septic system maintenance, including wetland preservation in some of their regulations and policies at the municipal level. So when they're looking at development, ensuring those wetlands are protected, naturalized shorelines, so new developments and municipal lands, looking at how those are managed. So those are some of the kinds of things that we're focusing on with sort of that focus there. The other piece that I wanted to address is sort of going back to being a voice for addressing the issue at the provincial and federal level. And I think it's really key, again, for municipalities on this issue to step up and be those advocates. And so there's quite a bit of resources that are available at the provincial level, both monetary, but also policy tools, regulations that either aren't being implemented or upheld. So as an example, we have an action right now that's asking the province to actually implement or uphold and enforce some of their existing regulations. And so I feel like this is another area where the municipalities, since they're going to be bearing the brunt of the economic costs, could be asked to step up and actually help advocate to push those measures forward. And then the other issue is plastics pollution. And I know this is one of those issues that I think is top of mind for a lot of our constituents and community members. And so there is an opportunity here to sort of see if we can sort of take that momentum is there at this moment and sort of push that to the next step. And so there again, it's sort of looking and asking candidates in terms of how they might help the municipality take action to eliminate single-use plastics, and that can be again through bans, looking at what other municipalities are doing. New York's banned styrofoam takeout containers. There's bans on plastics pollution. Single-use plastic bags. And then also again asking the municipalities to step up and be a stronger voice for addressing the issue at the provincial and federal levels as well. And then finally, the third area that we're focusing on, certainly within Lake Erie region, but again, applicable more broadly, is as Lindsay was mentioning, sewage overflows and green infrastructure. So I'm working with partners in the City of London who are very much sort of taking this and making it a municipal issue. So I'll leave it there, and I'll certainly happy to discuss any of these issues or strategies with folks further, and certainly interested in connecting people. So if there's groups that are working on it or individuals who are interested, it's kind of nice to not be working alone. And that's sort of what we did in London, whereas there's, I was talking to a couple of people who were interested, and we sort of got together and got a much larger group together who could actually be pushing on some of these issues at the municipal level. And that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Raj. That's wonderful. I'm going to jump in and speak a little bit around British Columbia. And I think in British Columbia, there are many issues that can be championed at the local level, which impact our freshwater, from salmon to forest harvesting to decision making. And I think, as you heard, obviously from Christine, Lindsay, and Raj, there's many angles and opportunities and tools available to municipal governments to really champion change. I'm going to focus on two real key moments in our province right now that I believe are extremely salient and give our municipalities the opportunity to champion community-driven freshwater protection. So the first real opportunity that I see moving forward into this year's municipal elections are around this historic year of water crisis that we've had in British Columbia. So essentially, almost no part of our province was spared from the historic floods that we saw through the spring, and then fires and drought that took place between May and August of this year. More than 20 communities were under local states of emergency in the spring due to floods. Wildfires reached record-setting covering the province in smoke and prompting another state of emergency this year. And nearly 90% of BC hit stage 3 drought or higher by August, crippling important salmon rivers and streams across not only Vancouver Island, but northern BC, which is a unique one that doesn't usually get hit that same way by drought. And so, and a recent report that the province released showed that 1 in 5 aquifers, a primary source of British Columbian drinking water, are considered to be stressed. And so when we think about the municipal election and advancing and growing bigger conversations around freshwater, we need our elected officials at all levels, but especially local ones, to really show strong leadership in defense of our communities and the water that we depend on. Because as many of us know, when our communities are hit by a crisis, it's those local communities that are impacted the hardest. And so we have an opportunity for local electeds to champion a few key issues here. And so one of the first ones, and this is really around advocacy because it's a provincial regulation, but I think this is where municipalities could step up and really push for environmental flow regulations to be a priority. And so a push for environmental flow regulations in local watersheds to ensure that our local streams and rivers are thriving. Because when a community is declared, stage 3, even stage 4 drought, it impacts those local residents, the ecosystem that depends on that water, but it also impacts the local economy. And so we need to ensure that communities have clear sets of recommendations laid out, not only at the provincial level in recommendations, but outlined through their water use plans, to ensure that there's adequate water supply to meet the functioning attributes that those streams require to support those communities. Another really big one is around supporting community-based water monitoring projects, which are critical to making good decisions about our watersheds and often in communities are driven and stewardship groups. So again, there is a role that the province could play in supporting these type of projects, but at a local level, there is financial support that a municipality could provide to these local groups that are doing community-based monitoring to allocate a line item in their budget to support that work, to feed that information back into the local decision-making that's happening. And a key opportunity, particularly for those that live in floodplains or that were impacted by flooding that happened this spring or potentially are at the risk of flooding along the Fraser River. And this is something that our friends at Watershed Watch Salmon Society have been really championing through their Connected Waters campaign, is upgrading flood infrastructure. So often where that infrastructure is aging or inadequate and is requiring updates or replacement, we could push our municipal governments to consider installing fish-friendly and flood control infrastructure. And this is a great opportunity where municipalities can really advocate to and partner with the provincial and the federal governments to get the resources that they require in order to do those upgrades within their communities. And then the second one is around UBCM resolution on watershed governance resolution. And so just this last week at the Union of BC Municipalities, there were several motions that were passed that prioritized fresh water in our communities. But one in particular was a motion on a new water governance model. And so in essence, the resolution, it's a transfer of resources and a sharing of from the province to municipalities to allow for local governments in partnership with First Nations and local watershed entities to have the power to address community water needs and concerns locally. And so this is really important in BC right now during the municipal elections because regional districts, municipalities, and First Nation governments are really closest to those local issues and the community concerns, with significant responsibility of delivering drinking water to their residents. And so local governments are really at the forefront of building those relationships with key stakeholders in their watershed, and many communities are actively prioritizing reconciliation with First Nations. And so this is a really great opportunity to build on this conversation. Some local governments support and fund data collection for watershed projects already, and gathering that local information to support water-related decisions at all levels is a key part of this as well. And so this resolution really positions local leadership to be champions for their constituents and for their watersheds. And so a decision like that happened at UBCM, the resolution that went through on watershed governments, really sends a powerful message to the province and to the federal government that British Columbians really value our freshwater and the important role it plays in our lives. So even though this is a first step, I would say, and we need to keep the pressure up to ensure that these resolutions actually result in meaningful action at the provincial level. Again, this is where ensuring that we are electing champions at the local level who can continue to advocate and push forward on these issues is a significant step in ensuring that we're moving this conversation forward throughout the next 4 years with those local representatives on the ground to allow us to work with them to hold the province accountable to these opportunities within our province to support local watershed decision making. All right, I'm going to pass this over to Natalia, who is one of our federal organizers. Or Lindsay, is this you?
I think I might jump in. Natalia was in and out of meetings with senators today on the topic that I'm going to talk about. So I'll jump in. Here, and I think this goes back actually to what Christine was saying at the beginning, is that there is an important role for municipalities to play when it comes to key discussions and conversations that are happening at either a provincial or a federal level. And the example that I'm going to give to that is the Canadian Navigable Waters Act, which is currently under review in the Senate as part of Bill C-69, which also includes the Impact Assessment Act and the Energy Regulators Act. And municipalities have been a key voice in those conversations federally around proposed changes to the Navigable Waters Act. And to be totally honest, not all of those proposed changes, I would say, are environmentally strengthening of the act. The municipalities often come to those conversations talking of regulatory red tape, particularly when it comes to municipal infrastructure projects, whether that be roads, bridges, or otherwise, docks in our communities that are waterfront communities. And so advocating for what you might claim is a weakening of federal environmental laws. And so I think that there's a really important role to be played to make sure that some of these important federal conversations are on the agenda, so that our municipalities can be leaders in advancing robust federal environmental laws. And so it's critical in this case around the Canadian Navigable Waters Act that municipalities support C-69 from the standpoint that we need to get it passed. It is not perfect. I will be the first one to say that. But especially when it comes to the navigable waters section of the Act, it is exponentially better than the 2012 version of the Act, and we can work to strengthen it over time. But we certainly need to get it passed, and we need municipal support in that regard. And then specifically, a really easy task that municipalities can take is nominating local waterways for added protections under the Act. The schedule that got a lot of people up in arms in 2012 does exist, although in a reduced capacity in this iteration of the bill. It is still there, and all signals from Transport Canada are that they will be dramatically expanding that schedule. But that's going to result, how it gets expanded is going to be incumbent on what waterways are coming forward to be included under the schedule. And so having our communities actually stand up for our waterways and nominate them for inclusion on in the Act is, I think, a super important way that people can engage locally on what might be construed as a federal conversation.
Great, thank you so much for that, Lindsay. All right, we are moving right along, jumping into our last section, which is on tools to engage candidates and constituents during your municipal elections. So we'll jump through this right now and then get into our question period. So if you have questions, throw them into the chat box. I know there's some really good conversation happening there right now. Or if you're joining us by phone, you can email us. You can email Megan at megan@freshwateralliance.ca. So jumping into tools, so a really great way to get your candidates as well as your constituents engaged is through all candidate meetings or all candidate town halls. And they're really central to the democratic process. And so these meetings really can create an opportunity for connections between candidates and community members and allowing voters to make informed decisions on election day. So not only does it give your candidates the opportunity to present their platforms on issues that matter to the residents, but it gives those residents the opportunity to really raise these local issues that they feel need to be addressed by whomever those successful candidates would be. So some of the benefits to your organization, if you were to either host a water-focused all candidates meeting or potentially really encourage and push your supporters to go out and ask those important freshwater questions, are that you are educating your candidates on the local water issues in your community. Water is obviously a complex issue that impacts our communities in multiple ways, and I think an important thing that Lindsay mentioned is we can't expect that our elected officials are experts on every single issue, and that's okay. We want them to be leaders and good decision makers, and so that's where we can use these opportunities to really inform and educate them on the challenges impacting our communities. It also allows us to really build a freshwater community conversation during the election that can live beyond that election period. And so because during election period, those candidates and our elected officials are really listening, and they're paying attention to the top issues that are coming up consistently. And so again, this is a great opportunity to really make water one of those key election issues that people vote on by prioritizing the opportunities around freshwater issues. And the last one is really around engaging your community or your organization's members on either those key issues that you've been advocating on already to date, or campaigns that you're running to really elevate those topics again into the bigger conversation, and hear directly from those candidates about what they're going to do to address those issues. And then the second one is around sending a survey to your candidates. So sometimes organizing an all candidates town hall just might be out of the question, and timing wise, resource wise, and that's okay. But another really great way is to provide a survey to your candidates. And so it's a great way to get a detailed response to questions from your candidates, which you can then share out with your community and your members who, perhaps they wouldn't be able to join an all candidates meeting and to hear what those responses are. And so again, it's a really great opportunity to build relationships with the candidates that are running. And so when you reach out to your candidates, offer to sit down and meet with each of them to talk through those issues that your organization's working on or those issues that you're concerned about. And so it not only makes the issues real, but it puts a human face to the people that are doing the work on the back end. And it allows you to build that relationship with potentially someone who's soon to be elected in your community. So that can be a really powerful opportunity. Surveys also allow you to identify water champions and leaders that are running for office. Whether they're elected or not, it's great to know who are those champions that are going to stand up and they're going to fight for the issues that are important. And so again, those folks that are identified as water champions that do get elected, it's an amazing opportunity to then be able to work alongside them. So not only then are you holding them responsible for the commitments that they made during that election period, but then you have an opportunity, now that you've built that relationship, to work alongside them to support ensuring that those commitments are successfully executed. The survey to candidates, as well as the all candidates meetings, are just really good ways to engage your constituents on the local issues, get them out there talking to their candidates, and then informing and educating your candidates on what are the priorities and the issues to your community members as well. All right, Megan Peloso is our BC Communications lead. So I'm going to pass this over to her to speak to freshwater friendly candidates.
Hey everybody, yeah, Megan here, and joining from Smithers on the unceded territory of the Wet'suwet'en, where we have finally been graced with some fall weather and rainfall and fresh snowfall on the mountains too. So I'm going to wrap up the presentation here with a bit of a high-level finish, going back to how we can hold municipalities accountable to freshwater leadership, and also spark conversation in our communities to take advantage of the election process. As the rest of my team has laid out, there are so many ways that constituents can engage candidates on freshwater. And in all cases, it's helpful to start out with a solid set of questions. So a good way to start thinking about that is to pose the question, who is a freshwater friendly candidate? What kinds of things would they do or be interested in supporting? How would you discern their position with regards to freshwater friendliness? So we've already gotten a lot of great tangible examples in this presentation so far for how municipalities can be champions. And the Canadian Freshwater Alliance has also developed a sample list of questions to get at the heart of some of the core shared challenges that we face around water management in municipalities across Canada. As Corey mentioned in the chat box earlier, we will be sharing this out as a resource to participants in the follow-up to the webinar with the recording. So I've laid out a couple of sample questions here from that resource that are likely to be relevant no matter where you are. And the more they are adapted to your local context, of course, the better. It makes for a great conversation starter in your community to define these questions, and they can certainly be adapted for provincial and federal elections as well. So a couple of them that we have here are around collaboration with First Nations and other levels of government to ensure freshwater is sustainably managed. How will that be done? Pollution. Canadian municipalities have a big role to play in ensuring that untreated sewage into lakes and rivers are dealt with. And we talked about this earlier, having more public transparency around live data so that we know when it's unsafe to be in our waterways. And thinking about who is a freshwater friendly candidate is a useful way that we can engage constituents and candidates basically as a conversation starter. So discussing the value of water locally and the role of local decision making and advocacy to ensure responsible management of freshwater health. So a good list of prompting questions is a great tool that anyone can use and share. And it's meant to build a bigger conversation that's relevant across provincial and federal elections also. And as Lindsay mentioned earlier, not all of our municipal representatives are going to be really aware of freshwater issues. And so we do have a role in bringing that into clear focus and letting them know it's important to us that their efforts as our representatives also include freshwater leadership on our behalf. So that's a wrap for me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion section.
Great, thank you so much, Megan, Raj, Lindsay, and Christine for all of those pieces that you put forward. Really appreciate that. We are in our discussion period, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So I know there's been some robust conversation happening in the around combined sewer outflows and phosphorus. Are there any other questions that folks have that they want to throw up into the chat box for us? Megan, has anybody emailed you with any questions as well?
Nothing on my end, Corey.
Okay, we'll give folks a quick moment to write in their questions here in the chat box. If you're percolating on anything particular, we've got a big team here of folks who can answer some questions for you. So we'll give you a second to submit your questions. And again, while you're writing up those questions, we will be sharing this recording of the webinar to everybody who participated, as well as the municipal primer that Christine mentioned at the beginning that really outlines the role of municipalities and opportunities that they have around freshwater, as well as the freshwater friendly candidates document that Megan spoke to around questions that can be asked of candidates that are sort of impacting municipalities across the country to really grow that bigger freshwater conversation around Canada. And we've got some tools that we've found from other organizations that they've put together around how to organize all candidate meetings and whatnot. So we'll make sure to link you up with all of those resources. All right, it looks like we may have some questions here. What are some of the documents, plans, pieces of legislation regarding Lake Erie water quality? This is from Sarah. So Raj, I'm going to pass that over to you if you can provide us with a response very quickly.
Hello. Yeah, so I mean, I think water quality is pretty broad, so I guess it would depend on specific focus, any specific focuses you have. Certainly on the algae issue, there's a couple of key. One is the IJC's report called A Balanced Diet for Lake Erie that sort of really outlines some key things that needed to be done to deal with the Lake Erie algae issue. And so I feel like that's a really good starting point. And then there's also the federal and municipal government released their Lake Erie Action Plan, which by no means is it has some good points in it. It's certainly not complete, but I feel like it does have some worthwhile opportunities in there. But I would start with at least on the phosphorus issue and algae blooms issue with the IJC's report. And then if there are other particular pollution issues, then I can sort of dig up some other ones too if there's other issues that are of key interest. Certainly invasive species are another key issue as well, to ones that I've already mentioned.
Great, thanks so much, Raj. There's a question here from, sorry, just trying to find it, Kathy Lindsay. We're dealing with the nuclear waste issue because of Chalk River, Renfrew County. Feedback to Muni candidates here from elsewhere, given short and especially long-term risks. Lindsay, have you come across sort of some bigger conversations around nuclear waste? I'm not sure if any of us are at the Alliance are specifically working on that issue.
I certainly have in other lives, and certainly I've seen at least my experiences in Alberta, where we did successfully kick out nuke proposals in the province. And it was led by municipalities. It was led by people organizing in municipal elections and getting a council that was willing to stand up for and the interests of the residents, which, you know, in this case was widely concerned of, and in some cases straight out opposed to nuclear energy coming to the region. And so I think that raising it as an issue within municipal elections can give you a huge leg up if you can get a council that is concerned about the issue and willing to step up and voice that concern.
Hi, it's Kathy Lindsay here. I asked that question. Hi. I'd just like to elaborate just a bit, if I can take a moment, because the question did come across as a little confused. What I was suggesting was that it's a big issue here, in part because it's a big issue and very long term and a lot of waste, but also because in Renfrew County there's a very strong support for doing nothing because it's seen as interfering with economics and jobs. And what I see as a value is that if people from other parts of the country are contacting municipal candidates here to say that they're very concerned about nuclear waste and the health of the Ottawa River specifically, and the nation's capital, and a new heritage river, and all those things, raises its profile other than just those of us who are here being seen as a thorn in the side of economic well-being.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being able to rally the broader freshwater community is can be a huge opportunity. I think that's where webinars like this can be instrumental in connecting across the broader community, as maybe people aren't dealing directly with nuclear challenges, but it's something that people, you know, are concerned about. So I think it's a great idea to try to rally members from other communities to put pressure. Something that I would think of, I do know that Environment Minister Catherine McKenna recently swam the Ottawa River this summer. So obviously not municipal, but could be interesting to approach her as someone who's like a passionate, you know, open water swimmer, to see if you can get a comment from her on the issue as well.
I was just going to jump in quickly too.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's Christine here, Kathy, and obviously, you know, kind of pitting the environment against the economy is not specific to the nuclear issue. It's something that we see a lot. But I think, you know, there's been a lot of really great work done by some organizations that work to show how, economy and environment are not in conflict with each other. In fact, if the environment is degradation, it has really serious impacts to the economy. So there's been some really interesting work to kind of take that narrative and spin it back, because if we don't have a healthy environment, it's going to affect fishing, tourism, health, all of these different things. So, we've worked a little bit on this, on a values toolkit where you can take different and I can provide a link to that as well, that shows different values people have with regard to freshwater and how to kind of posit those in a way that really resonate with people and bring in those economic, and other values as well. And then I'll see if I can dig up some interesting campaigns that have looked at, the impacts of environmental degradation on the economy as well.
Great, thanks so much, Christine, for that. And it looks like, Kathy, there's a few different connections that folks at the Alliance can support making in order to help raise the profile of this. So stay tuned. And I think there was one last question here where was it? Sorry, a more general question. This is from Marlo Campbell. How might your strategy change if it's a one-horse race? And I think I wouldn't say that all bets are off. If you do have a one-horse race, I think it regardless, like during an election, people are still paying attention, and it's still a huge opportunity to elevate the local issues. One of the biggest things I would say in that situation is get that one candidate to provide you with a commitment or response to your questions, because that's the starting point to be able to continue to move forward and work alongside them and work with them on those local issues, and really use that opportunity to educate them to, if they're not necessarily on board with all of the issues, how you can support them potentially in becoming an issue. And again, I would say, depending on what municipality you are a part of, whether that person's running for mayor or so a lot of the systems, like mayor still only holds one vote. And so ensuring then that you've got the rest of your city councilors who are on board with your issue, then you've got many more voices and votes at the table that are going to be able to hold that one particular candidate, to account, or be able to override them if they're not, potentially that one person's not in favor of your issue. So I would say by no means is it a lost cause, and there's still lots of opportunities to educate and bring along and get sign-on from the other candidates that are running. Okay, I'm just looking at the time here. We're 3 minutes over, and so I see a question from Fiona, and so I think we'll answer that question, and then we'll wrap up here. So it says, I know that Canada's groundwater has by no means been completely mapped. In area where runaway development is happening, i.e. Southern Ontario, it's vital to have accurate mapping. Can we push candidates on this, do you think? Who at the Alliance would like to take this on?
I can speak to it very quickly, not completely answering the question, but I know the Wellington Water Watchers, who are based in the Guelph area, have been very active in actually raising groundwater issues during this municipal. Fiona, if you're interested, I can certainly put you in touch with them, just because they work on groundwater issues quite a bit, and see if they have any answers for you, or certainly to if you're interested in any of the issues that they're pushing. Oh, and Arlene from Wellington Water Watchers is actually on this call as well, so she can probably help address this question as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Raj. So in just in the interest of time, because we're at our time, and we want you to be able to go on and enjoy the rest of your days and your afternoons. I really want to thank everybody for participating in this webinar. And if you do have any questions that come up following this, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Alliance. our website, sorry, our email address is at the bottom there. Our general one is info@freshwateralliance.ca, and you can reach any of us through that email. Or if you do go online and you want to speak to one of us directly, all of our email addresses and contact information are on the website. And again, just really want to thank our funders that really help make the work that we do at the Freshwater Alliance possible. Because we couldn't do it without them. And again, thank you to all of you for joining us. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar, as well as the municipal primer and the Freshwater Friendly Candidates Guide, and some resources around how to organize within your community election. So we hope you have a fabulous day. Good luck organizing and advancing the issues in your municipal elections. And we really appreciate all the work that you folks do across the country on the ground in your home communities and home watersheds. So thanks so much, and we hope you have a fabulous day.